Hello there. Welcome to another installment of Chuck's Captivating Chat. Caught me a little off guard here. I've been incredibly busy the last few days. Well, actually, the last few weeks. So I was just immersed in my work here, and I realized it was almost 5 o'clock, and I better skedaddle, get my laptop out, and set my light up and start chatting with you. But the fun thing about doing this show now is I just treat it like a Zoom call to some friends. Um, I find, I can have a few ideas from some topics in my head and just work off that. And many times, my wonderful friends out there, hi, Ward, you're not late. I'm the one who was late. I didn't get on here until about 5:01, 5:02. But anyway, I always appreciate it when you guys come in and you just give me topics, give me ideas. And the last few shows I've done, I've just gone off in directions I wasn't even expecting. But that's the fun of this. It's just fun to join all of you and watch you start to come in. But Ward, just I'm late. What did I miss? You didn't miss a darn thing other than me explaining myself. Where do I even start? One of my jobs. I have my hands on a lot of things right now. I work as the assistant for the marvelous Dr. Whimsy Anderson, a gifted naturopathic doctor and an intuitive reader. I do her show on Tuesdays, Taco Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And one of my duties is going through her roster of clients and making phone calls to people because Whimsy loves to just keep that personal touch going. So it's a great way to chat with people, just see what people's concerns are. And as it turns out, a lot of Whimsy's clients are also in her audience for Taco Tuesdays. And some of those people migrate over to this show. So it's just all the more special when I get to know you personally, chat with you for a few minutes, where you know my voice, I know your voice, hear your feedback, and most of you have really nice things to say, and that lifts my spirits a lot. Really makes this worthwhile. Well, hello, Kathy. Yes, and Sasha. Sasha is sleeping somewhere in the kitchen right now. She may or may not come out to make an appearance, but the star that she is, she reserves that right. So I'm trying to think, what am I going to talk about today? Well, first of all, I'm grateful that I have this laptop here to even be doing this show today. One of the other things I have my hand in right now, I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics, but I'm helping a therapist friend of mine. I'm basically ghostwriting her book right now, and that's all I'm going to say because I want to respect her confidentiality, and also we don't want to give away any ideas, but it keeps me busy. So anyway, Thursday night, using this very laptop that I'm talking on right now, just merrily typing away on my chapters and everything, close the lid for the night. The next morning, open up my computer, turn it on. The screen is scramble, like all over the place. I'm like, no. Mercury retrograde right now. We've got a very bright full moon, and we have a Mercury retrograde. I forget what else is going on right now. I think I saw something where Jupiter and Mars are so close together in the sky that they actually look like one star right now. So it's a lot of things going on. My computer went out. Yeah, some of you may be saying, now don't blame it on the Mercury retrograde. Yeah, I know, but a little coincidental. So in order to have my laptop for today and for Taco Tuesdays tomorrow, I had to rush to my local Apple store in Hollywood on Cahuenga Boulevard. And today I joyously, I say that facetiously, I divested myself of $500. Dirty old money. Who needs it? No, it's frustrating. This is a lot like, Ward, sunspots. That's a possibility too. That can certainly affect communication. I just heard Sasha. She may be joining us for the show. but it's frustrating. It's like when the car breaks down or something, it's like unforeseen expenses like that. I had a perfectly fine working computer Thursday night. To get myself back to having a perfectly fine working computer, I had to take some money that it was that frustration of finally starting to get a little ahead, to actually have some money to maybe do something fun for myself, something nice. No. And to fix the screen on my computer. And I even considered getting a new computer, but I just can't afford that right now. So I patched this up. But I can't help but feel like yes, that jingle was Sasha. My mother left me some wonderful antiques. And one of the things I have hanging on the wall are some old, what do you call them? Jingle bells, cowbells. Or you put them on a horse, bells, like on a sleigh, on a beautiful leather strap. And I've got that hanging. Well, Sasha loves to run by and smack it. And that's what you just heard right now. So anyway, I should stop whining and moaning about my $500 that I lost. No, I divested myself of today, invested into my computer, which I use for my work. So, no, I'm very happy right now because I do have all of these projects going on. Writing is a great love of mine. So I'm very thrilled to be working on this project. And I've been alluding to an art project for Hollywood. And I still am not at liberty to talk about that because it has not officially happened. It has not been set. I still have to have a big meeting with a very important person to set this up. So it's all up in the air, but I've been working on some artwork. I will share this much. It has to do with old Hollywood history. Guess what? I happen to love old Hollywood history and doing portraits. And this is something I've been working on. Betty Davis. I did this. I know I can't get the painting held back far enough to get it all in the frame here, but you can get an idea of it. The hat, I mean, oh, I can't get this into the frame. Maybe if I go back further. But this is Betty Davis from the 1939 movie Dark Victory. And most people paint to calm their nerves. I tend to paint to make myself go insane because I love to challenge myself. I don't always think I do, but deep down I do. And I was very drawn to this old glamour, black and white glamour photo of Betty Davis and the fur coat and the fur hat. Yes, don't call PETA on me. This is not politically correct now, but it was very glamorous back in the day and very old Hollywood. So I'm working on some portraits. I showed you the week before the Shirley Temple I'm working on. This I actually did in near record time. Usually it takes me about 3 weeks to a month to do a painting. I worked very, very hard on this and actually got this done in 7 days. And that includes this maddening fur coat and hat. And usually that's the type of thing I try to shy away from. I could have picked something easier, something I could have done quicker, but there was just something about this, the way the light was hitting her face, the shadows, the fur, the way the light was hitting the edges, the way it was reflecting on her forehead. I just thought that was so beautiful. I love light, illustrating light in a portrait. I love the way it hits eyes, brings out personality. There was just something about this, and it was just so Betty Davis. No cigarette in her hand, oddly enough, but very Betty Davis. And I wanted to do this. Oh, what's that, Kathy? Your AC went out and cost $499.20. Yes, so much cheaper than $500. Yeah, I beat you by 80 cents there. Or mad money that had a sudden fit. Excuse me, please. Yeah, my money got mad and had a fit on me. But anyway, I did this, the Shirley Temple. I have a whole portfolio I'm going to bring in, but I wanted to bring in some examples of paintings because that's what I would be showing if I do get this gig. So there's one more I want to do this week. If I have time to get the canvas, and I just have time to paint it. But there's this wonderful picture of Marlene Dietrich wearing a sailor outfit. Very what's the word for it? But just very Marlene Dietrich, and I love it. And that's what I'm going to do as well, if I can pull this off, and then hopefully have my meeting. And I hope I have some good news to share with you, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, because this will mean a lot to me. It's been, I'm not going to go into it, but challenging personally for me. So to have a really great writing project and a really great art project in my life means a lot to me right now. It's something where I can throw my passion, I can throw my love, I can throw my creativity into. I definitely need to be working more on my YouTube channel. Any of you who are observers probably have seen I've had a lot less videos, particularly this last week. But a part of it is just I need to recharge. I need to switch my focus just for a little while. I'm certainly not giving up on the YouTube channel. It's one of the reasons why I make a point of doing this show faithfully every Monday, because at least I'm consistent with this. I'm trying my best to get at least one video up every day or two until I start producing some new ones. Though I did do a new one last week. I talk about it now on the show, except it's an old story I've talked about too many times already. It was the time I was in line to see Lucille Ball do an episode of her final series, Life with Lucy. And I was getting my my haircut last week. Yes, believe it or not, I get my haircut. It's long, but I get it layered and everything. Right now it's all pulled back. When you have 1 minute to get ready to do a show, this is what you do. And you have long hair, you pull it back. Ladies, I'm sure you know that too. But as I was driving back from West Hollywood, it occurred to me it was the 38th anniversary of the day I attended the filming. And I happened to be going past the studio. And I thought, well, might as well get out my little iPhone studio here and shoot something. So that was the video I showed last week. Probably the first new video I've done in ages. I promise you I will do more. I think what really, really burned me out, I got way too ambitious with the channel in that during, I think it was the month of March, I cranked out 144 videos. It was Oscar month, so I was doing a whole series of videos about history of the Academy Awards, because I live 15 minutes from downtown Hollywood, where the Dolby Theater is and where they do the Oscars. I went there and just did a whole slew of remote videos, walking around the Hollywood Walk of Fame, standing in front of the Dolby Theater, showing all of the construction, the chaos, the cacophony, all the preparation that goes into Oscar week. And it's just, I don't know if you get this way sometimes when you just push and push and push and push. For myself, I start to get adrenal fatigue, I get emotional fatigue, and I'm still kind of just needed to get away from this for a while. I see I'm looking at some of the comments here. Words of the gift of art beats the price of therapy. Yeah. Sometimes I think like if you saw that fur coat, I think I needed therapy. You should have seen me Saturday when I was, getting into like strand after strand after strand of that fur coat. And I thought I was going to lose my mind. Kathy, yes, missed your videos, but understand. Oh, thank you. Well, Kathy, no, I've been doing, I've been dipping into my vast archives, because I do have several hundred videos, and I've been rerunning some older pieces. And a lot of those older pieces were like from last October, November, December of last year, when my viewership was much smaller. I'm very blessed right now. I've got over 1,600 subscribers right now. But in those days, I think I was at like under 200. So I was thinking a lot of people never saw these in the first place. So let's get them out and let them be seen again. like last week, my dear friends Joyce Petrus and Pam of Pomona Remembers, we joined forces to make a 2-hour special honoring Carol Burnett. I'm very proud of that, and it only aired once, so bet your life I got that out again last week and put it up. Let's see, well, Miss Davis claimed the Oscars were named for her first husband. Well, and I don't know if you know the story or not. She was married, let me think. She was married to a man. I'm trying to think of his name. I know she nicknamed him Ham. I think his name might have been Hammond or something. She called him Ham. He was yes, Ham Nelson. Thank you. He was a band leader. And Betty quipped, the backside of the Oscar looked exactly like the backside of Ham when he was naked. And his middle name was Oscar. So that's why she called it Oscar. And Betty always claimed that she was the one who named the award Oscar. And of course, others have differed with her. And I remember, and I read Betty's book, This and That. That's what it's called, This and That. She published it about a year or so before she died. And she said, okay, I relinquish all rights to the story that I named it Oscar. I'm just not going to argue it anymore. But I think she did. Yes, it was written after her stroke. And the book was written actually to retaliate against, I think it was a horrible book that her daughter, B.D., her name is Barbara Davis, Sherry, but she went by B.D. Hyman. She wrote a Mommy Dearest type of book. Only difference was Christina Crawford at least waited after Joan was dead. B.D. published this while Betty was very much alive, and also when Betty was really down. She had just had a mastectomy, and immediately after the mastectomy suffered a series of strokes, almost debilitating strokes. If you've seen video footage of Betty post-stroke, she was very frail. She couldn't speak as well as she could. I think the woman just fought valiantly to get back. She probably endured intensive speech therapy and probably physical therapy, because Betty said, if I can't act anymore, I don't want to live. For her, acting was everything. And so she had to come back. But she was in a very low spot when that book was published. And it was just viciously cruel. And Betty wrote This and That. It was a collection of stories, hence This and That, but she did reserve to write. The very last part of the book was an open letter to B.D., and it was not too nice, but it was justified. And Betty spoke her mind, and she addressed specific things that Betty felt. I'm paraphrasing this, but I think Betty was more upset about what B.D. did to misquote her in speaking of other people who were her friends and her colleagues. And Betty very much wanted to address that. And of course, we also know that Betty disinherited B.D. and left her fortune to her personal assistant, a woman named, I forget her last name. Her first name was Catherine, and she wrote a lovely book about her friendship and her working career with Betty Davis. I think it was called Miss D and Me. I recommend it. So anyway, that's my little thing about Betty Davis. Oh, you know what? This is the way the show works. One of you makes a comment, and then it gives me a tangent to go off on. You may not know this. Betty Davis was once my neighbor. In a kind of, sort of, roundabout way. This is when I lived in West Hollywood. I moved there from the East Coast in 1985, and I was thrilled to learn that Betty Davis lived 4 blocks away from me. No, I didn't get to meet her. She lived 4 blocks away from me on Havenhurst Street. She lived in this 6-story building called the Colonial. Now, I heard I heard at the time she lived in the penthouse. According to Catherine's book, she lived on the third floor. But nonetheless, Betty Davis lived 4 blocks from me. No, I never did get to meet her, but I used to love to kind of joke and kind of not joke, particularly to my friends back east. Betty Davis is my neighbor. But it wasn't like I could go over there and borrow a cup of sugar or borrow garden tools from her, anything like that. But yes, Miss Cermak, that was her name, Catherine Cermak. It's a very good book. I highly recommend it. But it was fun having her down the street. And at the time, I became very close friends with a man named Al Morley. I've mentioned him before in the show. He owned a memorabilia store on Melrose. If you know Los Angeles, the Pacific Design Center on Melrose in West Hollywood, he had a little shop right across the street from there. And he sold like framed autographed pictures of the grand old stars. And I mean, he had people like Hepburn and Garbo and Marilyn Monroe and Charlie Chaplin and me, fresh off the turnip truck from Virginia, but growing up loving old Hollywood and all this. I was like a kid in a candy store in there, and I struck up a great friendship with Al. In fact, my home right now, you're only seeing a few things. You should see all my walls here. I have got a huge collection of autographs, pictures of the Hollywood golden era, contracts, checks, letters, everything authentic. And I was inspired by my dear friend Al Morley. He passed on many years ago, but I think of him from time to time. And I think, well, basically I recreated his store in my home. But anyway, Al told me that Betty Davis always, I wish I dusted those frames diligently, Ward. I'm terrible about housework, and I've been really bad about housework the last few weeks. I need to majorly overhaul this place. And hi, Pam. Thank you for joining. It means so much to have you here. Pam, by the way, you sent me a video message. I just haven't had time to play it yet. I promise I'll listen to it soon. It's just been a crazy, crazy day. But I love hearing from you. Yeah, Pam and I are quite close. She was a guest on this show. That's how we met several months ago. I was interviewing her, and we just hit it off. And we were using Restream. We ended the live broadcast, but we still had the cameras on. And we proceeded, what was it, Pam? We proceeded to talk for the next 4 or 5 hours. And we've been friends ever since. Yeah, I have met so many wonderful people through virtual means like this. I love it. I'm old enough to say this. I love this technology, this fangled technology, because I come from the era where we didn't have anything. We had a telephone on the wall attached with a cord. Let me see, 3 channels on the television, 3 networks. No answering machines, no VCRs, no DVD players, no internet, no YouTube. And oddly enough, we were just fine. But gives me a special appreciation because I feel like I've lived in both worlds, that and this. But anyway, my friend Al Morley said that Betty Davis always signed her own pieces if you sent something to her home. A lot of stars do this. To this day, have secretaries sign for them or auto pens or anything like that. He said Betty Davis, it was basically over my dead body. She was adamant that it always be her signature. So he said, write her at Havenhurst, send her a picture. And 2 days, he did tell me, be sure to put an envelope with return postage on there, addressed and everything. So I did that. And 2 days later, sitting on top of my mailbox was an envelope from me that I had written out. And I knew it was Betty Davis. I opened it up and there was the picture. But what was interesting, there was no postage on the envelope. She kept my postage. She must have had her assistant, because it was 4 blocks away or something. She probably handed it to her assistant, Catherine. Here, this is 4 blocks away. Would you drop this off? I'm certain that's what happened. And then later, I had not an original movie poster. It was like a 11 by 17 reproduction of the poster for Dark Victory. Oddly enough, Dark Victory. It was the Italian version. I think it was called La Tramonto, which means, I believe, sunset. Sunset. That was another way of saying that Betty was dying in the movie. But again, Betty signed it for me quite beautifully, and I've got that framed. She was just wonderful about that thing. Oh, Pam, you were your dad's remote control. I think most of us kids were basically the remote control. Here, go change that channel. Um, Maybe Miss Davis dropped it off herself and walking her dog. Now that's a thought. That's a thought. I don't know if Miss Davis would have done that. I would have been thrilled. I would have loved to, of course, met her. Like many of us, I'm a fan of Betty Davis. Al Morley was a close friend of Bob Osborne. You probably recall Bob Osborne from when he hosted Turner Classic Movies. I got to meet Bob a few times. Very intelligent man. You had to really be on your toes when you had a conversation with him, but he was just fascinating. Such a love, a passionate love for old Hollywood and encyclopedic knowledge. But he and Betty Davis were close friends. And I said, Al, please, pretty please, could you set up a meeting for me to meet Betty Davis, please? And Al said to me, oh, Chuck, you don't want to meet her. I said, yes, I do. Yes, I do. And he said, no, trust me. She's a mean, crazy, neurotic old woman. And I promise you, you will be very upset if you meet her. You will be so disillusioned if you meet her. And I was like, how can't I form my own opinion? So hence, I never had my meeting with Betty Davis, even though I did have a connection that could have made it possible. And, to give you an idea of Betty, I heard other stories. She could be really cantankerous and difficult and very brusque. And this is a story, actually. One day I'm going to shoot a video. This is where I'll go to the Colonial Building on Havenhurst, stand there in front of it, and I'll do this video. I should have done it last week when I was in West Hollywood. Darn it. I'm thinking of it, but I'll tell the story here. Betty had lived in the building for a while, and there was this male couple, gay couple. They were living together, and they just moved into the building together, and they were, of course, elated to know that their neighbor above was Betty Davis. And one day they encountered her in the elevator, and they invited her to dinner. And to their amazement, Miss Davis accepted the invitation. So they proceeded to polish the silver and get out all the good china and all the good crystal and the Irish linen tablecloth, and made a grand meal. And Betty came over for cocktails and for dinner, and it was a gracious evening, wonderful conversation. And then Betty, as she was about to leave, said, would you come over for dinner at my home? And they were like, yes, we would love to have dinner with you, Miss Davis. We would love that. And so they come over, cocktails, dinner, nice evening, a conversation. And then Betty shows them to the door, where she proceeds to say, and I swear this is a true story because it came from Bob Osborne, you've had me over for dinner. I've had you over for dinner. Now I never want to see either of you again. She shut the door. That's an absolutely true Betty Davis story that I don't know if has been repeated too many times. But hence my friend Al saying, Chuck, you don't want to meet her. Trust me on this. And yes, transaction complete. But Betty came from a very proper New England background where if you accepted an invitation, then you reciprocated and you extended the invitation. She met, I guess, what she felt were her social obligations and etiquette, but then she had to leave it on that note. Ward, ever hear about her encounter with Mae West? Oh my God, yes. There was a documentary made about that. I don't know if it's still on Amazon Prime or it might be on YouTube. But well, first of all, I should tell the people who don't know here, Betty Davis was a big Mae West fan and had always wanted to meet her. Now, I think Mae was also a fan of Betty's, and so a mutual friend set up a dinner for the two of them to get together. Now, what a pairing, Mae West and Betty Davis. And unbeknownst to either of the ladies, this friend had a tape recorder that he put behind the bar, and he recorded the whole evening, the audio, just the sound of them talking. And there's a documentary where they have look-alike actors. In fact, the actress who played Betty Davis, a woman named Karen Talia, I did a play with her once, many years ago. Very nice lady. And I remember at the time she was making appearances as a Betty Davis lookalike. So I was very happy for her when she got this gig. So it was just the actors lip syncing to the audio recording. And it's fascinating. I can't look at comments and talk. Let me see. I've seen on YouTube with the recording of the two lip sync by two performers. Yes, that's what I was talking about. So yes, I find that fascinating. Apparently that was the one and only time they ever got together. And I was really surprised that Betty was such a fan of Mae's. But you think about Mae West. Oh, by the way, her 131st birthday was just a few days ago. Yeah. Mae was probably one of the strongest female personalities ever in the history of motion pictures. I mean, you think about her presence. I mean, admittedly, she wasn't the greatest actress in the world, but she was definitely one of our foremost humorists and such a presence. And when you think about it, it was remarkable because the Mae West character, the persona, that was 100% her creation. You may or may not know this, but Mae West wrote, I think, all of her screenplays, every single one. Plus, she wrote several plays she did on Broadway. I know one of her plays, because I saw an interview. It's the interview with Dick Cavett. Highly recommended. It's on YouTube. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's maybe 10, 15 minutes long at the most. And she did it 1976, 4 years before she died. And she said she didn't put Mae West on the script. I think she used a name like Jane Mass or something. And Dick Cavett said, well, why? And she said, well, I couldn't have starring Mae West, produced by Mae West, written by Mae West, too much Mae West. And Dick Cavett said, well, you once said you can't have too much of a good thing. Or her saying was, more is more. So the Mae West performer looks somewhat like Dolly Parton. Yeah, you're right. I remember that when I saw that. I need to watch that again. But yeah, I mean, it was an invasion of their privacy, but at the same time, thank goodness that was recorded, because how many of us would be thinking, God, if I could just have been a fly on the wall to have watched and listened to that pairing of those two people. Yeah. Yeah, it was the right time for the meeting. I seriously doubt they would have met earlier. Well, Betty Davis actually talked about that in an interview. She said, everyone assumed in Hollywood in those days, we just knew each other. And she said, no, I was working all the time. All these other stars, they were working all the time. I frankly was too tired to be out socializing and hobnobbing with all these stars. But she said, I remember her saying, I wish I could have been friends with Clark Gable and Carol Lombard. Obviously, Mae West was somebody she would wish to know. She was obviously fascinated by. She was probably also forming her opinions about Joan Crawford at that time. That's another story. But well, it's always fun how I do this show on Monday, and somebody just, oh, here's Sasha. Sasha, here. Let me see if I get her. She fell on the floor, but say hi to everybody. This is well, she doesn't really want to be on camera right now, but this is my beloved Siamese cat, Sasha. Yes, I'll let you go. Just want to make a cameo appearance here. Yeah, unless they were connected to the studio, might have been hard to meet. But even there, it was limited. But, Paramount was quite interesting because you had Claudette Colbert, Marlene Dietrich, Mae West, and Carol Lombard. So I've often wondered, did they ever get together? Anything? The commissary or something? Hobnob? MGM? You had Garbo, you had Crawford, you had Judy Garland, Norma Shearer, Lana Turner. Yeah. Well, I know I've talked about it before here on the show. At Columbia, my late friend Evelyn Keyes, who was a star at Columbia, used to gossip every morning with Rita Hayworth, and they became very close friends because actresses usually had to report at the studio by about 6 a.m. or so because they had to get the makeup and the hair and the nails done and body makeup. And it was a much bigger production for the women than the men. So they would sit under the dryer and they'd get their nails done together and things. And yes, Siamese if she pleases. She is something. Well, we're almost at the 40-minute point here. So I guess I didn't know it was going to be a Betty Davis show today. I should have had a clue when I showed the painting. What's that, Pam? I just watched a video about how cats see the world. Long story short, they would be considered legally blind. Wow. That surprises me. Maybe we're not so aware of it because cats, their other senses are so developed. Their sense of smell, their sense of hearing. I understand even their whiskers. They feel around with their whiskers, and maybe because they're so blind, they need their whiskers to get around. But that's fascinating. Yeah, I tell you, Pam, you and I, we need to chat sometime again very soon. We can talk about that. Let's see, Ward. Oddly enough, Dietrich and Mae West had adjoining dressing rooms, but only saw each other in the studio. Now, that's something you'd think in passing or something, unless one of them was hiding behind the door. Okay, is she gone yet? Can I come out now? I was once at the old MGM studios. It's gone through several incarnations. It's now Sony Columbia, but a lot of the old MGM buildings are there. And on the tour, they took us into the building where all of the star dressing rooms were. There were two levels. There was a building for the men, building for the women. And I think there were I'm trying to remember, something like 8 to 10 dressing rooms. These were reserved for the very, very big stars, So there would be one floor like Lana Turner, Judy Garland, whomever else, and then, but upstairs, Greta Garbo, Joan Crawford, And I thought, wow. And there was a story once I read, something Joan Crawford. It was around the time she and Garbo were making Grand Hotel, but they had no scenes together. They never worked together, but their dressing rooms were almost side by side. I don't know if literally side by side on the same floor of this building. And Crawford ran into Garbo and she said, Garbo took Joan's face in her hands and said, such a beautiful face, so lovely. Such a pity we have no scenes together in this movie. And Crawford said, if I were ever going to turn lesbian, it would have been in that moment. I remember that quote there. Oh my, I got off on a tangent here. Dietrich and Miss West seemed to like each other, but didn't socialize outside of work. I would say that's quite true. I understand Mae West was not into the Hollywood social scene at all. When she would go out, she loved to go to boxing matches. It was well known May loved the company of men. She was not so much into female friends. She loved to be with men, masculine things like boxing events and things like that. And also, she was not a drinker. She lived a very clean life. So, cocktails and parties, that type of thing, would not have been her scene. So maybe that's part of why she and Dietrich didn't socialize. Oh, Pam, thank you. You'll send me the video. Yes, I'd like to see that. What's that? The eyes had it? Whiskers? What's that? Well, maybe you tell what you mean, Ward. Unless you mean me. Yeah. But anyway, I was going to close the show since this became a Betty Davis themed show today. I held Betty Davis's Oscar, the Oscar she won for Jezebel. Yes, you know how we all have bucket lists of events we've done in our lives. I don't know if that was necessarily a pre-planned bucket list thing, but it certainly is fun to talk about now. It was years ago. And what's that? Well, Marjorie Main was a friend of Mae West. That's intriguing. Mae was, she lived a very simple life outside of the movies. And even though she famously lived at the Ravenswoods apartments in Hollywood, and I have a video on that. I've actually posted a couple of times, but Betty Davis eyes. Yeah. She had a horse ranch in the San Fernando Valley. And I read that Mae West would wear blue jeans, just like a old plaid shirt, blue jeans, no makeup, a cowboy hat, completely unrecognizable. And, Mae was a very tiny woman in real life. Very tiny. I think she was maybe 5 feet tall. And you may know this already. The reason she wore those long dresses all the time on film was to disguise the fact that she had platform shoes, something like 6 inches high. And I've seen a pair of them. How she walked in those things, I don't know. I'm sure she had to practice quite a bit, but that gave her the illusion of height. She was a very tiny, petite woman. And a few years ago at a Christie's auction, no, it wasn't Christie's, it was Julian's in Hollywood. And in Beverly Hills, they were doing a Mae West auction of her belongings. And I got to see a lot of her dresses and hats and jewelry, the shoes. And what struck me most, I knew she was a short woman, but she was much smaller in real life. Mae wore padding because I saw her personal dresses, which were almost pencil thin. They were not for a buxom woman with an hourglass figure. No way. So it confirmed what I've read in books, that Mae West wore special padding on her hips and her breasts to create that hourglass figure in the movies. I think later in life she did put on some weight naturally and all, but I was just shocked to see those thin dresses. So anyway, get to the point of the Betty Davis story. She was in drag. Well, Mae West was accused of being a drag queen. And you know who accused her of that? Raquel Welch. In 1970, Mae West came out of retirement to make her first movie since 1942. It's a film called Myra Breckenridge, and her co-star was Raquel Welch. And the two women hated each other. It was like loathing at first sight. And Raquel never had nice things to say about Mae West. Never had nice things to say about her. And she accused Mae West of actually being a man in drag. And there was something where Raquel said, look how thick her neck was. That was a man's neck. She had these big man's hands. No way she was a woman. Pretty vicious to say. Which reminds me, when she was making her last film, Sextet, in 1978, Dom DeLuise had a small role in it. And he goes, "Hey, May, there's this rumor that you're really a man." And she goes, "Oh, you want me to prove them wrong?" So anyway, that's Mae West. But I was going to say, with Bette Davis, I held her Oscar. It was her second Oscar. The Oscar she won for Jezebel. Lots of photographs of her on Oscar night holding that Oscar. Well, I had it in my hot little hand. It was a Christie's auction in Beverly Hills. And it was the first time they were auctioning off Marilyn Monroe's happy birthday dress. The famous Jean-Louis nude gown covered with the crystals that, happy birthday to John Kennedy. It was being auctioned for the first time. And they had it on a beautiful clear plexiglass custom mannequin. And they had little lights on it to make all the crystals sparkle. And that's why I went there. Well, there was a security guard standing nearby, and on just like a little card table, just a little folding table, was this old 1930s Oscar. And you can always recognize them because the base was shorter on the Oscars in the 30s. And I saw a little card saying Bette Davis's Oscar for Jezebel. And I'm like, do I touch it? And I thought, no, I better ask. Otherwise, security will come in here and throw me out of the building. And I just very politely said to the security guard, "May I please touch it?" And he said, "Oh, hell, pick it up. Nobody's looking." So I held Bette Davis's Oscar. So anyway, I guess that's a good way to wrap up Bette Davis. I can't think of any other stories right now. Before I sign off, does anybody have a question, a comment, anything else you'd like me to elaborate on? Another tangent to go off on? Let's see here. Well, no, nobody's coming through with anything. So I guess I'm going to, let me see, I'm just looking through to see if I missed anything anybody said. I've been doing this for like a year now, and I'm still trying to master the art, looking at the camera and looking over at the comments. And it's still that feeling of rubbing my stomach and patting my head, but I'll get better at this one day. I wish it were almost like a teleprompter where I could just have the print over the image. You wouldn't see it, but I would see it. And then I could just give the illusion that I'm talking while I'm reading comments here. The shorter Oscar bases. They didn't change the base of the Oscar until after World War II had ended. I think the Oscars we know it now were first given out in 1945 or 46. And you probably know this also during World War II because there was a shortage of medals. They had to make the Oscars out of plaster and then spray paint them gold. And people were told after the war was over, they could trade them in for the real thing. So I would imagine all those people from 1942 on got the Oscar with the taller base on it. And I understand the reason for that base was so they could have the plaque and they could engrave it properly. There wasn't much they could engrave on those original Oscars. And I'll tell you also, those Oscars don't hold up very well. I think I told this before, but years ago at the Motion Picture Academy, they were, I think this was the year, it was one of the big anniversaries for the Oscars. So in a massive glass display case, they managed to borrow an Oscar from every single year from 1928 up to present day. And so there were people who would loan their Oscars like Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn and what have you. And what I noticed, the Oscars from like present day to about 5 years back still look pretty good. Then when you started seeing them progressively get older, the gold was flaking off. They were tarnishing badly. Some of them had scratches and dents in them. And then as they got older, all the gold was completely off the Oscars. It was nothing but base metal at that point. And then that base metal started rusting and corroding even worse. And there was one Oscar, I think it was Tom Hanks. It had a great big crack going down the middle of it, like it was about to split apart. And Tom Hanks once even talked about that on a late night talk show, how he wanted to get it repaired, and he sent it to the Academy, and they said, "Oh, we're so sorry, Mr. Hanks. There's nothing we can do here. We can replace it for you, but we can't fix this." And so he decided, for sentimental reasons, to keep his original Oscar with the great big crack in it. But yeah, it was. I think Glenda Jackson was talking about how it was a metaphor for the phoniness, the superficiality of Hollywood. She talked about that. She gave her 2 Oscars to her mother, who kept them on top of the toilet in the bathroom. And Glenda talked about how all of the gold had come off and they were just base metal. And she said, that's just a metaphor for the superficiality and the fakeness of Hollywood. Haha. You know, I think now Betty's Oscar looked good, but I think they had re-dipped it in gold and fixed it up and everything. In fact, I understand, I think Steven Spielberg bought her Oscar. I know he bought Clark Gable's Oscar also when they were up for auction. And then, this was great, he donated them back to the Academy, and they're now on display in their museum where everybody can see them. So what a lovely thing to do. Yes, Glenda Jackson was magnificent. I saw her on stage here in Hollywood back in 1991. It was with John Lithgow and Cynthia Nixon, who was later on Sex and the City, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? And it was directed by Edward Albee, of course, who wrote the script. And I thought, well, this is going to be phenomenal. Glenda Jackson playing the role of Martha. Oh, my God. And it's directed by Edward Albee. It was excruciatingly dull. Not to impugn anyone, but maybe because I've seen it too many times. But I think the fault was Edward Albee. It's been said an author of a script should never direct their own work because it's too precious to them, and they don't have the objectivity they need. It's like Edward Albee directed the show at this slow pace, and which to me did not make sense. It was clearly direction. I don't blame the actors. I've done enough stage work myself to know that it's more a director's medium. You do what the director tells you. And anyway, the premise of the plays, it takes place overnight and it ends as the sun is rising. Well, I remember the play began 8:00 and it went on almost 4 hours. I remember this. It was close to midnight and it was over. And you really did feel like you had been up all night with these people and the sun was just starting to come up. So maybe that's what Edward Albee was trying to achieve. Reminds me of when I saw Olivier in Time in the West End in London. What was that like? Yeah. As Wiki was saying, probably didn't give the actors leeway to play. No, I just got that impression that he had a very tight grip on the play and he was not going to relinquish it. I wanted to hear about Olivier. I'd love to have seen Olivier on stage. Closest I ever got to sing a really, really legendary great was Maggie Smith. I saw her on stage in London. It was you may know the play Lettuce and Lovage because she later took it to Broadway and won a Tony Award for it. I saw it in London when it was still in preview. So I was one of the first people to see it. And I was just thrilled to see the great Maggie Smith on stage. Well, let's see. Do we have any other comments here? I think I've been, oh my God, I've been talking for almost an hour here. I think it is definitely time to wrap up the show. I want to thank all of you as always, for joining me. Your participation, it means a lot to me, and I don't take any of you for granted, and I'm very thankful for you. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. Sasha, wherever she is, I'm sure she wants to say goodbye to you. Please like and subscribe to my channel, Chuck's Captivating Chronicles. I promise I'll get more videos on there, and I will at least do this live stream. I'm even toying with the idea of maybe doing this a couple of times a week in lieu of making new videos for a while, because I just love talking to you guys. Even if it is one-way conversation, right? Well, it's not one way, because I'm getting your text messages here. It was totally canned, isn't everything lip sync? I think he recorded his part months earlier. Oh my. I wonder, I know that Olivier was quite ill in his final years, and he was working very hard, probably working himself to death. He was quite prolific. He did a lot of movies toward the end of his life, and maybe the stage production was one of the things. He was in bad health. On film, of course, you can shoot around that. There are tricks. Stage, I guess this is how they did it. They just pre-recorded the dialogue and he lip-synced to it. I wasn't aware of that. I just know he was quite ill. I forget what illness he had near the end, and I guess he was just counting on the fact that he was still a very bankable star, a legend, and there were people who would pay very good money to see him on stage. I know I would have if I'd had the chance. So anyway, I'm going to sign off for now because I want to watch the Democratic convention, and I've got a lot more work to do tonight. So please like and subscribe my channel, Chuck's Captivating Chronicles, and I will see you here next week. Thank you so much. Goodbye.